welcome to your show.
Yeah. It's good to be here.
Yeah. I would imagine just with your with the listeners, um, you could just give a little bit of context about what's maybe a little bit different than the norm or the other podcasts that are happening.
Hmm.
Probably start there, I would imagine.
Yeah. So the essence of this podcast is sort of exploring another person's sort of cognitive space, what I like to refer to as like their map of reality,
Mhm.
their ideas of how the world works and how it should work. And I come into the podcast with sort of what I like to call performative agnostic. I act as if their worldview is true, and I'm just here to understand it and then kind of explore together.
Right.
And you and I had that when you were on the last podcast, and a lot of people really resonated from both our audiences in the circling community and intellectual explorers community. Really resonated with that episode, and so it just intuitively felt right for us to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then kind of like when we're chatting beforehand, we're like, hey, let's just circle me. um,
Totally.
and and I guess people in the pre-introduction recording, I'll kind of explain again what circling is, and then also reference to the previous podcast that we had. But the idea now is for you, the founder of circling, to circle me.
Mm-hmm. Great. What would you say? First of all, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you as well.
Yeah, it's such a good time. It's such a good time. Like time disappeared when we talked last time, and it was like that because we chatted for a while before we pressed record. It's the
Hmm.
kind of thing. Is it's just a real. I just noticed very little hesitancy in me. No, like from the moment that we met, there's just kind of a very um, there's a very like an I have a very pre-reflective, open response to you, and I find myself just not being so self-concerned. And
Right.
it seems like it seems to me that has a lot to do with like the way you meet the moment.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because the feeling I get with when I'm relating with you, and we haven't even met in person. We just kind of met like twice on Zoom, but it has a similar felt sense of someone I've known for years. And it's like kind of a weird feeling because I have that feeling, but then like I'm just like I don't know much about you and your personal life and all that, the facts of your life, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting to think about, well, what is that? Like, what is that sense of familiarity? What are we familiar with?
Hmm.
What knows to feel that way? Like it's like I think that that's just kind of interesting. Like I noticed with myself a lot of the things where I feel like a sense of a flow state that happens are usually things that I find my interest gripped.
Hmm.
And then it could be years before I even comprehend exactly what I'm interested in about that, like, or why I was interested in about that. And there's a, that's always been interesting to me of like, how does my interest know to get, to be grabbed by something? And before I even understand what there is to be grabbed about, there's some kind of non-verbal, kind of non-cognitive thing that kind of gets gripped by the world. And I think it's something similar with you. It's like there's something, my interest just goes there and it doesn't stop and
Hmm.
consider itself and gets self-conscious and
That's awesome.
all that stuff. And I would say I guess the question I have is, of our when we had the first interview, like, what were parts, was any of it like what you would call circling? Did it have any elements of circling from your
Hmm.
perspective?
Yeah, in the sense that, okay, so I'll say the no part was that I wasn't trying to sort of police myself in a certain way when I do encircling. I'm really loyal to the rules when I circle, so to speak.
Yeah.
And but this process that was similar was the mapping over my words to sort of what was happening in my reality.
Mhm. Yeah.
and then just sort of just like without kind of engineering, like especially when I shook off the whole kind of podcast host mode, I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to engineer an outcome. Like, okay, we have to talk about this. We have to have this sort of experience. We have to produce this artifact for the listeners. It was sort of just kind of just seeing each step, taking it one step at a time.
Right. And it sounds like that what you were letting go of was a kind of a transactional nature of,
Right.
we're doing this in order to achieve something else. That there was something about, and that's what I really felt. I noticed that you did a lot, and I really appreciated it. Like, you're just like, oh God, I want to get and you're like, okay, I'm just going to shake off. You shake off the I it, right?
Right.
And it would go into I thou. And what was interesting to me, and this is one of the things I think it's important about circling, is so there's a very there, to me there is a form to circling, right? And it's really important, and especially when you're first learning how to circle, because the form, like any kind of practice, puts a constraint around you. Like, if you're practicing tennis, or if, like, I remember, I think it was in Rocky Balboa in the first Rocky, he wasn't a southpaw, and he was trained to be a southpaw, and they show scenes where he's like his hands are tied up, his right hand, so he couldn't use his right hand, and he had to work within those restraints, and so he became a southpaw and surprised everybody. So it's like
Right.
any kind of practice or skills-based practice will always involve usually constraining yourself so that you don't do what you're naturally good at, and you do something that you're not that good at, and you struggle with it, and that struggle
Right.
is important. But also, what that starts to reveal is that circling isn't necessarily, at least to me, isn't necessarily about just talking about what you're feeling, or talking about, like, or staying within a certain language. But there's a kind of point where you can kind of like circle with the person that you're sitting next to in the bus stop, right? Without even using any of that language, but just the way that you enter into the dialogue, the way that you are, and your sense of spontaneity, and like being aware of, like, implicitly where your body starts to get oriented to being with another, right, in all of its complexity, and being present to that person is and you are, and that there's something happening, and that you can even stay within all the social norms. But circling is really that thing that you enter into it in such a way that you invite that which is most real, right, to shine forth. And I thought that really happened with us, right, in the podcast. Even when we were talking, even when we were talking about, like, our maps of reality, we were going really, really meta. Like, we did go really, really meta. But there's something about that it didn't occur heady to me. There's something alive to it, right? And I would say that aliveness, or that kind of spontaneity, where I was, when you're listening, I was saying things I'd said before, but like at a totally new angle, and was kind of aware of that. Then I became aware of the quality of your listening, and how that was like a horizon that brought that in front of me. We kind of appreciated that together, right? So there's a way in which I want to kind of just really communicate that, because I think some of my my beefs about, like, the circling community, we were talking about this earlier, is I think sometimes they think that uh, it's kind of like this. It's like if you went to yoga class, right? You go to yoga class, right? And you do these extreme postures. You don't walk out, right, and then just start doing downward dogs on your desk at work, right, in your spandex, right?
Right.
That'd
Right.
be really weird. But rather, right, going to yoga class has you inhabit, right, like, the gravity that you deal with throughout the day in a more open, conscious way, right? So you can do all the things that you do just more elegantly and more openly.
Mm.
And so there's a way where I think sometimes, like, because it's become kind of a thing, and things are things, and They have like an air to them, and a kind of like a you know like you're in something, you can become identified with it. That there's a tendency to think that like circling and the rules of circling or the agreements um, are instructions to be in the world.
Right.
I don't see it as that at all. I see it as like, no, the restrictions and the sentence stems and the attention to language and how we talk about ourselves and reveal ourselves are like yoga. They're like asanas that we do, so that you can go and not so that you can go and like circle your mother, and
Right. Right.
but so
And,
that you can actually inhabit the conversations that you always have with your mother, right? In a way that's like a lot more open, a lot more intimate. It draws out more spontaneity. And you don't even ever have to really necessarily explicitly talk about your feelings, but you can bring that awareness that there are feelings happening and have a relationship to them in your bodies and all the micro movements and the curiosity that you have with them without having to sound weird, right?
right. And I know exactly what you mean, because there's a few people that I've experienced in the, I guess, the broader circling or authentic relating community who do that, where they take those rules that exist in that container of circling and they apply it to kind of everyday life, and it just comes across, in my opinion, as awkward when that happens.
Right.
And I was mentioning you before we started recording about as a similar metaphor, my experience with acting when I was younger, and it's like, in acting, you can go to all these crazy emotions, right? You just go loud, you go quiet. And I've taken acting classes that actually use acting techniques for social skills.
Mm.
And when you do that, it's like a light dimmer, right? Your ability to go at a really high emotional level, really low emotional level, it allows you now to do that kind of, or it gives you the option to do that in the wild in a kind of a normal social environment, but you just don't do it. You don't kind of take that acting technique and put it in like a everyday setting, but you have the capacity to, so it allows you to calibrate.
Yeah.
And I guess the way to do it is like, if you can be successful in that container, that circling container or the acting arena, it's like, it's transferable skill set to have in a
Yeah.
different arena, but it's not like you kind of are sensitive to the rules of that arena though. You don't just kind of disregard them and implant a different set of rules.
Yes. And the skills that you practice, right? As you're practicing them, the real thing that's happening on one level, you're becoming a better communicator and you know what words to say and when to say them. And but what's actually happening there is what it takes to be good at that is really developmental,
Hmm.
right? Because I've noticed this, that like, in the when we teach the art of circling, which is our facilitators training program, we talked a little bit about this in our last podcast, where there's like 7 stages
Right.
that we've distinguished in circling, and so each weekend is on a particular stage. And the first one is sovereignty, the second one is explorer, the third one is warrior, deep sea diver, um, the midwife, and then integration. And it's interesting because sovereign, right, is all about just being aware of self, basically, like kind of knowing where your center is, knowing where you end and someone else begins. And learning sovereign is all about the language of owning your own experience, knowing where to put your attention to like find yourself and then start to articulate yourself, right? And that's like, that can be really difficult for some people, but it's doable. Like, you're like, okay, what are you feeling in your stomach? Like, I don't ever feel oh, actually, okay. Oh, I'm tight there. Oh, I have a tightness there, right? So like, you can kind of bring your attention to it, and it can be difficult, but you can do it. And then there's the explorer stage, and people can pretty much get a grip on that. And there's the explorer stage, which is all about like, well, who are you? And it's about asking questions. It's about like getting your world. It's about like kind of playing it back in such a way that it makes sense and that you get that I'm listening to you, and deep listening. And there's deeper levels like that. Like, I think circling is really a deep dive and explore. Ultimately, all the stages are about that. But people can pretty much practice that and get really good at that. But then when you get to warrior, right? Warrior is all about like naming dissonance or being with dissonance and welcoming it and looking at it and sealing exits around what's most alive, right? And
Mm,
often uncomfortable, right? Now that, when we start to get there, that seems to take a developmental level. Like that's not like it's not like you can kind of know what to do with your hands. There are things that you can do, but leaning into discomfort with somebody and like, especially for example, if somebody is, let's say, really scared of someone else's pain, right? If they see it, right, they have to kind of like, they have to work through their issues around like, well, what's it like to, are you afraid that you're going to get lost in their pain and you'll never go like come back? I mean, some people have experiences like where they have tragedies and trauma around that stuff.
right.
So like that's because so there, that's where it becomes really developmental, right? And then it's like then being with somebody else's emotions, you can only like be with your emotions to the extent that somebody else's emotions, to the extent that you can be with your own, right? And so that's where it gets really deep, right? Where the process of learning circling is actually kind of like a psychological developmental, I would say even a spiritual kind of development, that
Mm,
when you practice these things, you're on one level learning the skill, but what it takes to become good at that skill is actually developing the capacity to relate. And that capacity, right, is something that's much deeper. And
mm,
it makes so much more possible.
mm. Yeah, I like that. Um, and I'm curious how, and I mean, this is going to kind of like intellectual exploration mode, so you can kind of swipe this question away, but just, I'll just throw it out there. I'm curious how um, you develop this. Like, I imagine it organically kind of formed after years of practice.
Yeah. That's the trick. I mean, that's one of the tricky parts of it with me is like when I circle, I never think about rules. I never think about really what I'm doing because I didn't learn it that way.
Right.
Um, I learned it through just like, it seemed like that thing we were talking about where being hides itself and conceals itself and then something's revealed in the interaction. And like Jerry and I noticed that thing caught us and we kept looking at it. And as we kept looking at it, the process of looking at it was the process of this thing called circling, which is really
Uh,
about being with what is in relationship specifically. And it wasn't therapy and it was different than anything else that we were around. Or Jerry had done a bunch of stuff. I was pretty new to it. He had done a bunch of courses and like, so he was really like, whoa, this is different. And then it kind of like a few months later, it got a name called circling. And then like more people got into it and like there was a whole community that formed around it. And then other people started doing circling and now it's all over the world, but it's really kind of a bottom up experience. And that way, you know, circling is really fractal.
mm,
And then when it was when I started to grok that I started to see patterns after doing circle after circle after circle. You know, I would notice where things would kind of fuck up, right? Where like it was like a scratch record or something like that. And it's interesting. I started noticing which is where like one of the leaders would say something and it's a scratch record.
mm,
But I'd also noticed if she would have said that, like they would have said that in the beginning of the circle, that would have been really congruent. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, there's a difference. We're at a different place. And I was like, that's when the stages started to like become distinct for me. And then it like becomes, you know, because that's what happens when you pay attention to something is attention. Um, when you pay attention to something and you sustain it, attention makes distinctions. And then you can only relate to that which you have distinctions for. So, so as those distinctions started to show themselves just through like gaining a sensibility over and over and over again, then I was like, I think we can genuinely teach this now. Because we
mm,
taught it, but we didn't know how we were doing it. So it was really difficult to teach other than, so we would just circle people until they bled. Right. You know.
mm,
Um, but then that's when I partnered with Alexis Shepard. who her and I taught together for years, and we got together, and she's got kind of a psychology background. She was getting her PhD at I forget what it's like, the kind of Transpersonal Institute or something like that.
Okay.
She was writing her thesis on the phenomena of awe. She's awesome. Like, she's just so smart and brilliant and beautiful and, luminous. And so we would get together and grapple with it and like write terms out and go like try to distinguish the things, and we do this in preparation for the year-long course, which was the first circling course that was explicitly about training to circle.
Hmm.
And so we would like have the first weekend, and we would kind of come up and bring terms to it. And we'd get in arguments and fights and like, but out of this really committed conversation with each other, then those distinctions started to form language, right? And the stages, like, I think we started with, there were 5 stages, right? Now there's 7 stages, and we've changed the terms at different points, because and I'm sure it's going to keep probably happening, right? Because when you get distinctions for things, right, in some domain, your ability to make distinctions becomes greater, right? So like the more distinctions that you have, the more ability you have to make distinctions, and that feedback loop, right? At least for me, looking at circle keeps yielding more and more and more and more. And as we were talking about before, there's this kind of point where I'm like, God, I don't feel like this is really not just about being close to people. This is about being close to the universe. Right? This is about like, oh, there's a kind of a mystical element in the sense of mystery that this starts to access, like, the wonder that's coming through your eyes, that is on one level it's you, but it's beyond you, and it can be concealed to you, and there's ways that we can let it be revealed. And in that revelation that we share together, in order to conceive of that and grok that, I have to become somebody who could. And I think for me, this has become, although circling isn't explicitly a spiritual practice, for me it's become my spiritual practice. And because being with what is, everything in your life is. So everything is a relationship with what is. And so authenticity, in kind of the Heideggerian sense, right, is this kind of way of like inhabiting temporality or inhabiting a moment, right, and taking on the world that you find yourself in with such authorship that one has moments of authenticity. And that happens everywhere. That can happen wherever there's anything. Wherever there's a you, there's a world. And that world can be infinitely complex. And this is, so as I'm doing this, I'm also kind of setting up context for us, like circling. But I've thought about this, right? About, well, why is it called circling? Like, it's so funny because we were trying to figure out names for it and stuff, right? Like, we were looking at Greek terms, and it just actually, how it was called circling was so random. Like Jerry, who is, we're both like, dorks, we're always we were always fucking with each other and like fucking with everyone else, and like we were, poking around, and he particularly was really pokey, and this guy, a friend who was kind of on the outskirts of everything, he never actually, ended up being in circling. He was just kind of in the general vicinity. He'd known Jerry for a long time, and Jerry started to like kind of like do, fuck with them and kind of do the circling thing. And he was like, hey, and he just totally around him. He's like, hey, you're doing that circling thing on me. And it stuck. Now, I always thought, like, for the longest time, I just thought that was just kind of random. But I'm like, well, how hang on a second. So I think that because it was so random and it stuck, reveals a sensibility about it, right? Because he could have said, oh, you're doing that, like, that Darth Vader thing on me, right? Or that peanut butter thing on me. And I don't think it would stick. And I've been thinking lately about, well, why is it that circling stuck? What's the sensibility that it makes sense to have it be called circling? And then everyone started calling it circling. And then before we know it, there was this thing that we're doing called circling. Is almost kind of like we found out after the fact.
Mm.
And the thing, how that makes sense to me is in something that Jung talks about, right? And Jung writes about this, but he also writes in this way. And this is why it's really something to read Jung. Because if you read Jung, get ready, because you'll have to become someone who could read Jung, which means being horrified and completely changed in the process of reading him.
Mm-hmm.
And he does this thing called circle. It's a way of being with something, or a way of understanding, that he calls circumambulation, right? And circumambulation is kind of like this. It's like it's a way of knowing, or a way of being with something. And oftentimes when we think about knowing something, there's a quality of like, I apply my brain or my attention to an object. And then the way I direct my attention, that object, then I know that object. But there are some things that have intelligence at so many multiple levels or dimensions that there's no way it'll reveal yourself if you kind of come at it straight on. So rather like really deep things, like people, like someone's life, right? Like a like a like a like a piece of the Bible, right? Like, has so many levels of intelligence that to know it is to circle around it, right? To circle around it. And as you circle around it, right, it starts to reveal all of its complexity, right? It starts to shine forth. That can't be grokked like subject object. It's like
Right.
it's like a non-Cartesian way of knowing. And here's the thing about that is that circumambulation, that the one who's circling becomes part of the thing that's revealed, right? It's full involvement, where your participation in it becomes part of the way that it unfolds itself. And I'm like, that when I thought about that, I was like, yeah, there is that sensibility about circling around something, right? Is like, on one level, you're just the fact that you're doing that, you're already revealing it, in that the sense of like, oh, it's something worthy of circling around, right?
Mm.
And there's a humbleness about it, and there's like an involvement in it. There's a like being changed by it, being mutually articulated by it.
Mm.
And that very much feels like, as I've gotten better at circling with people, it feels to me that that's the thing I've gotten better at, right? Of like circling around something and being open to be changed by it.
This is helping me kind of grok circling. Because as I was mentioning to you, I was using this maybe a ill-advised metaphor of my experience of circling sometimes, where it's like almost like I get blue balls, like it's like I just want to like get the answer, get the orgasm, I just want to go for it. But it's like, that patient process that you're doing, that seductive dance of circling. But if you just go straight for it, it's a bad move. You're going to lose it.
Totally. That was very difficult for me to get the sensibility, because at first it's like, you're to get something, you go back and forth, and you just kind of zero in. I mean, I think who is it, Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. Like, we're always, if you're a human, you have an aim, and that you're orienting to it, and everything that you're doing is an orientation to something transcendent.
Right.
And I was in my early 20s, right? And I was, power lifter and bodybuilder, and like loaded with testosterone, and had the cosmic question deep inside of me. So it wasn't my tendency to circle around something. My tendency was to go and like
Hunt,
wrestle with it and like grab it. but then I'd notice like, actually there's another way of being with something. And that's when something shines forth that I couldn't have known was even there. And so just noticing that, and everybody doing it, getting attuned to that quality of beingness is really, I think, the thing that kind of drew people to circling, and what still does draw people to circling. And it's like when it becomes something else, you can kind of feel it. And that's like, it's also kind of cool because you can feel it going astray from the spirit,
Mm.
right?
When it gets to like therapeutic or people trying to caretake, stuff like that.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
So, so how's all this hitting you? This is like we're really starting to go into context with it. I think part of it, as I'm aware of, is just your stillness, and like your stillness and your listening. And I get the sense of like, there's an openness in your eyes, and like oh, like you're, and I'm noticing it's having me for me, it seems like the flow of my language feels in relationship to that.
Mm.
What's it like over there?
I get in this sort of state when I'm podcasting, just like a hyper awareness focus state. And yeah, I'm realizing just kind of like now that camera's on me, usually the camera's not on me, I realize I'm usually still in these moments. So maybe this is sort of how I get into this state.
Yeah.
Um, I am a little bit cold too. The air conditioning was on. It's really hot here in Toronto, so it's maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, and
What what
the,
kind of stillness is it?
the stillness I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah. That you notice that you have often. Like, so as I brought a word to it, you're like, it wasn't like you're thinking to yourself, I don't think you're thinking to yourself, okay, I have to stay really still right now. You just
No,
realize
no, no.
you're being still.
Right.
What kind of
Well,
stillness?
it's sort of like readiness is the word that comes to mind. You know, I am ready to take in your words, be transformed by them, and participate in, possibly transforming you. So, um,
Yeah. You've been
yeah.
listening. Right on. Right.
Right.
You've been listening. So, see, I get the sense of that. It is that, like the thing you're saying of, because there are moments where you'd move, or I just see like little glimmers in your eye, and you're really still, but there was an animation there.
Mm.
And I am imagining that there's a way that you're understanding, or there's a way that you're listening, that's actually kind of having you see things. Like you're not just like hearing my words and understanding them, you're seeing what I'm saying. I get this sense, like where you go, oh, and then you say that thing sometimes, like, oh, there's so many threads, like, which one to choose, right?
Right, right.
Excitement that kind of, or like a bursting forth.
Yeah. I think it's like, just to circle back to the stillness, it's like I'm really trying to listen to what you're saying because I don't want to miss a beat of it. And so, because I want to pass the like the ideological Turing test, I want to be able to articulate what you just said
Yeah.
in my own words till it just feels like so resonant what you previously said.
Yes.
Um, so that's maybe sort of like the readiness portion of it. And then those glimmer of moments is that when like, a daemon inspired thread emerges, like, oh, I could go somewhere with that, and maybe it's just like, I tend not to like to interrupt people in general, right? So I usually kind of just bookmark it in my head. Okay, here's a
Yeah.
potential thread to go down, potential thread, and then kind of that listening still to what you're saying, and then holding those potential
Totally.
topics.
So the thing I'm interested in, like right now with what you just said, you're like, oh yeah, somebody's saying something, and then something kind of, you said, burst forward, and like,
Mm,
and then you have, you're managing yourself, right? Of like, so you don't interrupt, but there's a spirit in you that goes, oh,
right.
I'm curious about what's the that, and what's the one that's like, that goes, oh, because not everybody, in my experience, like listens for those things to go oh about, but there's something that just seems present. I would imagine what I'm imagining is a particular disposition or orientation to life, or the way that you sit in life, that makes what somebody says burst forth, right? Like, it's almost like, in other words, it doesn't look like you're trying to do anything. It just looks like a state of being that you're in, that you're excited about something.
Right,
What,
right.
do you know what I'm talking about? Am I
Like,
stating it?
well, I'll say what comes to mind when you say that is that I'm in an environment right now with you, and then when I have my in-person kind of intellectual explorers clubs, is that I allow myself to experience that excitement, and I'm in an environment that is receptive to receiving it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's some environments that I kind of shut that down. I don't even like allow myself to go in that space. And then because there's a kind of an understanding that it's not going to be well received there.
yeah, totally. So there's an attunement
Right.
that you can attune. And so in this space here, because there's a context, right, in which we're explicitly doing that, you're really free to probably do what you probably want to do most of the time anyways. That's my hunch.
Yeah. I feel, I guess if there's a
Correct?
spectrum of freedom, this is higher on that spectrum.
Yeah, totally.
So the freedom portion.
So what's it like? So we'll just be fluid about this. I like I think what we're like, we can loosely say that we're circling right now.
We're circling around circling.
Totally, we're circling right now. And I just got just genuinely interested in you and what it's like for you. And I'm so now that we've actually kind of put a little bit of context around this, right?
Mhm.
I felt like this shift, right? Some kind of shift in just kind of happened for me. There was just a sense of like, oh, I noticed I was hesitant to make it too formal. Uh,
Mm.
I don't know exactly why, but that's what I just noticed. I was hesitant to make it too formal. Um, I think because I'm like, I just value kind of organicness to things, right? But also there's a sense in which I feel like we're already circling in some regard,
Right.
right? Like, and so specifically bringing attention to the present moment with you, right? What's just what are you aware of just right now in this moment? Now that we're officially circling, for the record.
Um, Coldness I feel in my arms.
Mhm.
So, a desire to kind of gain clarification on, okay, are we formally circling right now, or are we going to do it in a minute? Are we like
Totally. So
an
Tim,
internal?
I want to pause right there. So I've noticed
Yeah.
like a few times you've mentioned, I think 3 or 4 times, context, right? And an awareness of there's certain and this stood out to me, right? Like an awareness of the rules, right?
Right. Right.
You emphasize kind of like the rules in the form of circling, right? And what that's like to you. That shows up for you. You also mentioned like, oh, I can't do that all the time. There are certain places where I can't just get excited. That won't work, right?
Right.
And I don't think I'm speaking necessarily to. I think what I'm speaking to is it seems to me that there's a particular awareness that you have of context in different kinds of spaces,
Yeah.
whether or not you're in one space or not another space, and it seems unique to me about you, or a
Hmm.
proclivity. Does
I get this feedback from people who seem sensitive about these sorts of things,
Mhm.
and it's sort of like even though I kind of have this brand of being an intellectual explorer, I'm pretty an intuitive person. I say the bulk of my life, and and so there's a great intuition about the context and sort of the rules of that context, and sort of the intuition of people and sort of their intentions, and maybe it's sort of the implicit rules that they're playing by.
Yeah. Huh. Huh. So that kind of speaks to, doesn't that speak to a lot of what you've kind of become known for, isn't it? Like with the, because you have that whole thing about the memes and the culture, right? That kind of
Right.
went viral, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's kind of, actually, I didn't even dawn on me until now. Like I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. It's a good connection. I didn't really put much thought into connecting the two, but yeah.
So I just noticed I kind of like making that connection with you and like getting shared reality on that. I just felt kind of a little bit of a euphoria that came up,
Hmm.
like some kind of like, oh, like some, like a background became foreground.
Nice.
And I'm like, now I'm just noticing, I'm just wanting to, that glows, whatever that is aware of context and respects it, yet sees it, and also challenges it, it sounds like. Seems, I feel like somehow closer to you, or like I'm closer to what's central to you.
Hmm. Because I don't know what words I can put on what I'm feeling right now, but I didn't really make that, even though I was aware of that connection, it just makes more sense now that you stated it.
Mhm.
I probably wouldn't have been able to sort of map the culture war as I did without having this sort of intuition about me.
Yeah. That intuition about you. You said intuition about 5 times. How do you know you have, like, if I was in your nervous system, right? If like you took my awareness and put it in your nervous system, and I just inhabited your nervous system, like, oh, and I walked with you through your life, but I couldn't understand the context. I didn't know what was going on. I could just be in your body, feeling your sensations and your emotions, but I didn't have any awareness of it. What part of that would be that intuition, as you put it?
Hmm.
So how do you experience it, if you experience it?
So there's this term that resonates with me is the daemon. The daemon. You know, Socrates talks about his guiding spirit, and I lean heavily on that. I view it as sort of a certain color of intuition, a certain quality of intuition that kind of just has an assertiveness about it, and maybe just kind of stems from here and just rises up, and it points to the direction where you should go.
Right.
And I almost have like radical faith in that intuition.
Yeah. So just, I feel stillness there. I just want to sit. I just want to sit with that stillness, washed over by what you just said. But I mostly like having the experience of like how poignant what you said, but also the way that you said it and what just came through. It felt like the very thing that you're talking about just came through and just like I get showered with it.
Hmm.
And there's a quality of knowing you more, of liking you more, and of you. I'm almost feeling. I'm almost. It almost seems like that there's a. Um, what is it? A, what I, how I know to be interested or feel and flow with you seems to have something to do with these tensions going on inside of you, right? Like some of your complexity is starting to kind of show itself to me.
Hmm.
Because what I'm hearing is on one level, there's something you got your eye on and you're tending to and you respect and you're aware of what the rules are and in the context of it. And there's even a, what I'm hearing is that there's a discipline to listen to your daemon, right? That there's something and it takes something to do that, but it feels like a very disciplined sense to it. So on one level, I hear this tending to structure in the forms of the logos, if you will.
Hmm.
But then at another level, I feel like uh, a, almost like a fanatical discipline about that which is beyond the discipline, right? The thing that rushes forward, and you're
Right.
willing to like poke at things, at those structures. And I sense a kind of, that's a big part of you too, is that thing that kind of pokes at stuff
Hmm.
and wiggles it and points to bullshit. And and distinguish the things. It's all those are going on right in one person.
Mm. It's very interesting. That resonated on multiple levels. It's like this kind of this feeling of the daemon. If I just allowed it to operate unchecked, it would have been, it's just like this massive, ridiculous orgasm, right?
Yeah.
But I'm understanding the containers, the logos, of the different contexts that I operate in, and then sometimes the daemon gets to play more, and sometimes it has to be policed more. And I'm trying to cultivate my life, I guess, or the daemon's trying to nudge me to cultivate a life where it's allowed to play more.
Yeah.
And then that pointing, I didn't know how you connected the pointing out the bullshit or the poking the bullshit, but that resonates as well.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. There is really an interesting quality I'm experiencing with you of like, and how like personally how it's like how it's forming in me, right? Is there's complexities that shine forth, and I'm like, I wonder if we're like if our daemons are feeling each other or something.
Daemon sex.
Totally. But there's that daemon, that disruptive quality of the daemon is what I'm hearing. And you used an interesting word. There's times to police it, right? And let it flow. And there's like a policing element to it. And that you want to construct your life such that the daemon is telling you, make the construction have more of me in it.
Yes. In a way that the daemon is helping me construct
Yeah.
a life where it could flow freely and authentically.
And like, tell me a little bit, like, tell me a little bit about the life that you're looking at right now. I mean, you talked to like you it's like I know you're married, right? You mentioned
Mhm.
something about like yeah, tell me a little bit about just the structure of your life. Like what is your life like right now and how is that part going? Is how is the daemon flowing? Where is it really where is it going? Yeah, this is it. And where is it going? Nah, not quite yet.
Right. So I'm married. We're looking to start a family. We live in the kind of the greater Toronto area. I work a 9 to 5 job as a corporate trainer. And aside, like adjacent to that, I have all these what I would bucket under daemon inspired projects, whether it's the in-person meetup groups, whether it's the podcast, whether it's the various sort of articles, mimetic artifacts I'm producing.
Mhm.
And then I have sort of entrepreneurial ideas that I'm quietly working on that, could make that livelihood bridge from what I'm doing now to
Yeah.
something that might speak to me more.
Yeah. What is that? So you're talking about like the bridge. One of those things maybe actually you'd like it to like actually make your livelihood.
So the three things that I mentioned, like the writing, the podcast, I'm not really thinking of monetizing those, but I have entrepreneurial projects that could sustain a livelihood for myself and my family, but they take, it's like a long game. And so I'm quietly working on those, not publicly,
Yeah.
to build that livelihood bridge from what's securing me right now to that. And then that is really Damon inspired.
Right. So I just want to take a moment and just like kind of sit with you for a second. So now that we brought your life into articulation, just a little bit of it, what's it like being you?
Well, there's a calmness to me right now.
Hmm.
And there's, is it a mild nervousness or worry in the sense that I'm cognizant that this might become an artifact that we post somewhere.
Yeah.
And I never revealed this much about myself in a public setting.
Mhm.
Um,
So just pause 1 second. I just want to like kind of be with that experience for a second, right? So there's a calmness and there's a nervousness that you're like, when as you look at the nervousness, you became more aware of like, oh, what I'm nervous about. And I've never revealed this much of myself on a personal level in this
mhm.
forum. So I just want to take a moment and just kind of be with what that's like for you. I notice I'm smiling, really happy,
Yeah.
excited. I'm also, oh, like, I also feel respect
Huh.
in your privacy for whatever you're, whatever,
It's
whatever's there.
nervousness is the wrong word, I think. It's maybe concerned about losing control of the impression. And then adjacent to that, almost unrelated to it, there's just like zero fucks given about like who cares.
Totally.
So there's that, this like the duck rabbit thing, they go in and out.
Right. So that's cool. So what was started off as like the first look was nervousness. Now it's actually an awareness, right, of what I'm hearing is like the policing part.
Mm.
And the daemon's like, fuck, like just fucking like let's take her, fuck this. So both of those are here. Let's just let those be here for a moment.
Hmm.
And just let them.
Yeah, there's I feel a tension definitely in this, like kind of almost like this is where the tension is.
You know, it just really kind of hit me. I felt like a sense of compassion when I just became aware of when you said tension, your hands went like this.
Uh,
I just got aware of what came back to me is what you told me about your life. And what you described is like basically I felt really grounded when you talked about your life. You have a 9 to 5 job, right? You have these projects, right? And you have long-term investments. Like, so you have your eye on stability and you're very intentional about your daemon coming out. And it seems really responsible to me.
mm,
But in that moment when you're like, oh, I'm holding this tension, I was like, I also, all of a sudden it looked like it's also this kind of quality, the heart part of it felt for how much you're holding.
mm,
Like I just got this sense of like, I feel impressed with, yeah, you're just holding a lot. Like
mm,
you have your eye on, right? And it seems really clear that you're responsible about it. But you're also responsible about your spirit. And there's this quality of just like, oh, I just wonder what that's like, just holding all that.
mm.
If it's a holding, that's how I would.
Yeah, the term that it's coming up a lot in our conversation today is blue balls, right? So there's that one hand, it may feel like a blue ball state where it's sort of like there is a like, you know, maybe to disabuse people or yourself is that, you know, there's a kind of a wild man to me, and I kind of contain myself a lot in these type of environments,
Yeah,
right? Like if you and I got drinks together, like it's like watch out type of thing. We don't know where we'll end up. We're in Mexico or something like that,
yeah,
and then that's sort of like the daemon getting unleashed. And so there's like I guess a blue ball element to it. But then I like that responsibility thing. It feels very just, I guess, masculine, mature.
yeah, yeah. It's a maturity. It's a maturity. The awareness on containment, right? But just the way that you language it tells me it kind of gave. I think it revealed a quality of attentiveness to it, holding attention. Where it's like you take a couple drinks and then boom, like we get in a lot of trouble together. I can tell.
Yeah.
Blue balls to pink balls, you know.
I don't even want to know what that means, but
I don't either.
I kind of do.
No, so there is an awareness about structure. I'm just curious about what I get the sense that has a historicity to it. Like, how does it make sense that you're so responsible in one respect when you have a spirit that would actually just like to explode all structures and like make the realness kind of wiggle out into everything, right?
Mm.
Like, where does the respect for that come from, or the kinds of restraints that you know you tend to and be in relationship with? What do you think that? Like was somebody like that growing up? Like, I just sense that there's like a
Hmm.
sense of a history I'm imagining to it.
Well, the story that's just coming up is sort of just like a little kid's hand on the stove type thing. You know, you touch something that hurts you, you know, you take it away. And so it could have been a history of doing that. And I can kind of map over specific incidents of that. And then there was something else that came to mind. Just sort of like maybe a respect for truth, right? Just sort of like actually knowing what's real and what's reality, and the parameters
Yeah,
that you have to operate in.
yeah, totally. I know a lot of people, right, that have touched hot stoves that have a very different response, right? The thing that like, I think the thing I'm curious about is what knows to want to still be around the stove, even though it burnt you, right?
Uh,
Like, there's a sense of like, I'm noticing, I'm wondering what your wife is like. I'm wondering, like, my interest is going, like, what's your history? Like, what's your dad like?
mm,
Uh, like, what's your mom like? What's the, because on some level, like, and this is another thing I just wanted presence just for context around circling is, so the moment, we usually think about the moment as like an instant of time, right? There's this moment right now, this moment right now. That's not the experience of the moment. The experience of the moment is more like the way that we understand music. Like, there's a temporality, and it's really like, as Heidegger would say it, is like human beings, especially, is like you're listening. It's more like there's the anticipation of the next beat as the past beat lingers and elongates, and where past and future come together, and the history brings a gravity to the future, and then that becomes the moment as like a song.
mm,
So there's part of why I'm listening. I think why I feel like an interest is like I feel like an elongation of some history that has you be this really interesting tension between really responsible and tentative and like tentative and respectful, yet while having like a wild spirit running through you. And that what I'm hearing is that your entire life on some level is structured or distinguished or occurs to you, and having both those things like flourish.
mm,
And so it's like I'm feeling like the beat that just passed, or an elongation of like a history of like,
mm.
what was your dad like? I'm wondering what your mom was like, and all that stuff.
Mm. It's interesting because I put a lot of, I guess, intersubjective thought into my past, and I did a lot of work in that area, but I haven't really looked at it in these two sort of beings,
Uh,
right? If you want to put it that way. And then it just kind of feels like in the past, maybe they were polarized in a way, but
uh,
now they're sort of just like cohering together, right?
yeah,
And the idea, I want them to like kind of just mesh at one point in my life.
that that like that thing is, so what I'm hearing is first of all, that's kind of cool. So we're looking at your life in new terms, right?
Right, right.
On some level. So like now you have a new past, or
Mm,
there's a past where it's like, oh, there's these two things. And if I go back, it was kind of cool what you said is they get farther apart. And that now that we've named that a little bit, you look back and you now see, oh, there's been these two things and they're coming together. And my life on some level has been that sensibility of weaving them closer and closer and closer together. What's that like? I mean, it's revelatory to me. I'm
mm,
up and excited
mm.
by that happened.
So I will call out, there's one thing that I want to have somewhat of a distance to this narrative.
Yeah.
I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid of my excitement towards this narrative, right? So that's going on. That's probably part of the structure thing, if you want to like
Yes, there it
tie
is.
it there. Yeah. And
Oh,
there's an openness to it right now. Really, just want to kind of
yeah,
allow my body to sit with it
yeah,
and see where it takes me.
totally. What kind of openness as we sit with it? Is it
Hmm. Sort of, it's like method acting or trying on the wardrobe of each of those states and seeing how it feels like. So what does it feel like when I'm sort of have that architecture in place and I'm working on it, I'm constructing it? And then how does it feel like when I'm just kind of like, Damon inspired in the world,
mm,
right?
right?
And then how do those two kind of states play with each other
Yeah,
or
yeah,
relate with each other?
totally. And when we sat back, there was an openness to it.
Right.
And it's that there's a really different, it felt I had a different tempo in that moment when you said that.
Hmm.
Almost like I'm wondering if we're like a little bit in the center of the tension, right? Like the center of eye of the hurricane a little bit.
It's like, those, the duck rabbit. And then if you keep looking at it and then they shift back and forth and it gets a little blurry, right? And you almost see both at the same time. That's what I guess I'm experiencing.
And that thing that's tending to that, like what I'm wondering about your heart. Like there's a passion to you that is just delicious
Hmm.
for me. And one where I can appreciate because I have to do the same thing. It's like I have to corral the horses, right? Um, and I just get this sense that there's probably I just imagining there's a history of letting the horses out too far.
Right, right, right.
Like you burned yourself, but just the excitement and the passion seems like more like love to me. Like it's almost like you're loving something,
Hmm.
you're caring about something. Like that, I think that's what it is. It's like there's a sense of care, and also I want to almost like noticing. I want to like dive through your eyes and just go right down into your heart.
Hmm. It's like the heart stuff. When you mentioned the word heart, I just felt like a barrier towards it,
Mhm.
right? It's like I wanted to report on what the heart felt, but I don't have access to it. And it's like that you mentioned the care. It's maybe almost like this tension is like a longing to love.
Yeah. So there's a longing. Let's just say that. Let's just try on that for a second. Like the tension is there's a longing to love. If this is the source, if we follow that longing back, where do we go? We just like relax back into the longing.
Mm, mm. Just to maybe kind of paint the longing a little bit more so I can sense it. That longing is sort of like there's a feeling of it, adventurousness to it, right? And it's just like you're trying to taste something. You're trying to pursue the horizon and get lost in its beauty. But there's sort of like this. Um, I like the word adventure for whatever reason,
Yeah,
but then to focus on your question, kind of trace it back.
yeah. And what do you relax into when you trace it back? What is that? What's the quality or feeling or whatever that's there? I'm noticing my voice is softer
Right.
and more intimate.
Just there's a sensitivity.
Yeah, yeah.
there's a softness.
Right.
It's something I don't get to express too often.
Mm. Mm. Are you expressing it now? Is this a moment where you're starting to, you are or have expressed it? I feel the presence of the softness when you say it.
Mm.
Like there's a slower tempo. I'm noticing. I'm like more in my body, talking slower. I'm like, yeah, I feel myself attuning to something more like closer in, it seems.
I'm at the door of it. It
Mm.
feels like.
So let's just let the door be there.
Mm.
At the door. You mentioned I don't express this often.
Mm.
Let the door be there.
Mm.
Hey, what just happened there?
A thought arose about exposure therapy, about how you want to get someone closer to the snake, but not touching it, you know, and uh, and that kind of brought a little smile to my face because that feels like what we're doing right now.
Yeah. It's like I think how I would phrase it, right, is like, so we're being with what is. And what I'm hearing is like is like you're talking about, like is this concealment into unconcealment, into veiling into unveiling, to reveal. And the word to reveal is interesting because it means that it's veiled means it's something special,
Mm.
protecting. To reveal is simultaneously to unveil it, but also to reveal it. And
Mm.
so as we've just been talking, we've just been with all the different layers of, and now it feels like I'm in the presence of something that's being revealed, like more in concealment. And I'm noticing there's just a natural like softness that's coming up. I feel more personal.
Mm.
It feels good to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's a sweetness about it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I taste that sweetness too.
And I'm wrestling if I should say this. And so that means I should say it, or I think I should say it. Uh, there's a part of me when we're staying with the sweetness or the softness, it's mild, like teary-eyed feeling.
Mm.
And this is something that happens when I get to circling too. This is usually when I tap out. And then there's this kind of reflecting on the artifact that this could be. And then it gets twofold. Like, I don't want to go there. And then, oh, wouldn't it be cool to go there because I'm crying on camera with Guy, So and then that kind of like just kind of conceals the whole process or just distracts it.
Pause right there. So you want to pause for 1 second. So what I'm hearing is there's kind of a sense, an awareness of a listening or a gaze, right? Everything that you just said, I think, presupposes tending to what would
Mm.
look good, what wouldn't look good, what I don't want. Like there's a if we just let that gaze be there, if you look at the way that you just were moved in different ways to tend to it, what kind of gaze is it? Is it a gaze that's like loving you and being like, you're the best thing in the world, I want to hear more? Is it one that's like, is it aiming at you? Is it got a gun pointed at you? Like,
Right, right, right.
what's the sense of the gaze?
So the gaze meaning how it's like that watchful eye, sort of like my PR agent. Is that
Sure. Like I think what we'll know if we just say that every response is in relationship to an occurring world, right? And
Right.
so that response is in perfect correlation. If we look at the response, like the different levels of that, it'll reveal the background.
This is helpful. Okay.
Mm. How do you feel about being helped?
Feels good.
Yeah. I just noticed I want more of that for you.
It feels warm.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned the gazer, it almost feels like there's I see or feel something gazing at me now, and I'm trying to ask it or just kind of inquire into or put words to what it's doing. And there seems to be like a fatherly protective aspect to it.
Yeah.
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 And I'm almost surprised by saying that because I thought I was going to go a different angle.
Yeah. So you're kind of surprised by what you're finding out about you.
Mm.
Oh, there's a fatherly. That's something about that really resonated. In fact, I just wanted to say, like, I like that about you. But you named something that wasn't quite. I felt, and you just named it. And it came in. Yeah, there's a tending to things, and it's it's masculine, right? It has a masculine quality to it. It's got a penetrative quality to it.
Right.
And what I'm getting is that, so, part of what you mentioned is just an awareness of this being we're inside of one of what you call the passion project. We're inside of a context that's designed for you to take the most, like, the thing that you want to have guide your life happen in,
Mm.
right? Which is,
Right.
as I just presence that or brought language to that.
Well, it's like there's a mixture of being kind of impressed and by your kind of ability to call these things out, and then there's that feeling of resonance. Well, the resonance came out first, obviously, then the feeling of being impressed.
Yeah. So and on one level, it's funny as I'm sitting there, I feel literally inside of your care.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, we're inside of a thing that you built that wouldn't have been there. This wouldn't have been here unless you actually did stuff to create this that was listening to something that is almost out of your control, your daemon.
Hmm.
And like you have this form and we're inside of it. It's like literally I just have this sense of it's constructed in your tending and your caring.
Oh, that's so cool.
Mm, mm. Do you feel seen?
um,
You have that seen look on your face. I think that's the most I've seen your face change in that moment.
yeah, it's like I almost feel caught.
Huh.
That's the word that came to my mind. Like, oh shit,
Yeah,
because I don't feel seen that often.
great. And it seems like what I'm imagining is the thing that got seen is that you care. Like that's what it feels like is being revealed to me. It's like, oh my God, like you've this, we'll say these two aspects that have been a history of being at war with each other. You're fatherlyly, you're you're being a father and constructing things that like so they sing and we're inside of that. And
Hmm.
like we're inside of your passion and what you care about.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like you're seeing the not only the architecture, but you're seeing or recognizing the architect.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And like, what does the architect feel like now? now that the architect has been um, a little bit more revealed,
Mm.
such that the architecture is now holding the architect. And he's having a moment of pause, it seems. What's it like having him be seen?
It just feels very present, and I'm empty-headed in a way, and just I guess a quality of wellness throughout the body.
I just keep thinking about your wife. How come I keep thinking about your wife?
Hmm.
You know? It can
Because
be,
it's private.
yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, what do you think? It's interesting.
She doesn't come to many of my in-person meetings, right? And she came to one this week, and everyone was like Peter's wife. And it's a very private part of my life. You know, I don't speak about it that often. Um, and so I imagine on your part, it's sort of like you're poking nature. You want to kind of like, what she look like? What's your personality is like? You know, how does this guy match with the feminine?
Uh, it's more, you know what, actually, what's there? It doesn't feel pokey. I feel just a real deep respect for your privacy, actually,
Mm,
right? Like a deep respect for it. And so I've been having it almost throughout the whole conversation. And I'm just like, what? I've been refraining from bringing it in, but there's just a sense of actually what I'm wondering about if she saw this, right? And she was in the presence of like this softness that's coming forward, right? This caring thing that doesn't get seen that often. And she was here. I just keep wondering what that would be like for you and her and what she would see. And I'm wondering if it's almost like this question of like, I bet she has a relationship to this.
right, right. Yeah. She's probably the only person that sees it
Yeah,
on a regular basis.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
private.
Yeah.
What's it like just bringing in some privacy respectfully? Yeah.
To this project, this kind of Damon
Moment,
architecture.
this
Yeah.
moment. Yeah,
Of this moment.
yeah. So we're just bringing in to, it's going to be heard and seen, where there's a horizon of a listening that we're both inside of right now, right?
Mm. There's this feeling of like confidence in the sense that, or a feeling of rightness
Mm,
about it. It doesn't feel too intrusive. It doesn't feel like uncomfortably vulnerable.
right. Yeah, it's like really surprisingly so, huh?
Well, it's almost like surprising how it's not surprising, if that makes
Yeah,
any sense.
yeah. What do you make of that?
The first thing that came to mind is I'm on path.
Yeah, fucking hard path, man.
Yeah.
You really are on path. And then there's this other side of you, right? That we're in the presence of, and we're in the presence of a pretty like you know open to be seen place, and you're surprised at like how unsurprising it is, in a certain sense, right?
Right.
And there is a place where in you and I feel a respect of like, yeah, there's a relationship that your wife has, right? And you're probably the only person, what I'm hearing you say, that really sees this thing, that cares about all this, the architect underneath the architecture.
Mhm.
And how does she respond to this in you? Like, how do you experience, does she speak it? Does she just wordlessly acknowledge it? Does she hold it? Is she moved by it? Like, how does she relate to this place in you?
I think she thinks it's cool, which is she often expresses when sort of this sort of stuff comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she thinks it's cool.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when she thinks it's cool, what do you like? What's it like for you?
I feel attractive.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
accepted,
Right.
wanted.
Uh,
And then I feel, that attraction for her and,
yeah.
like a gel.
Right. And when you when you feel attracted, and she feels like, and like, and when she feels your attraction to her,
Yeah.
what happens over there? What do you see?
Then the blue balls goes away. I had to go there. Oh,
The full spectrum comes in, right?
the full spectrum. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Then the dance just happens, and just very, and yeah, now on this, the privacy walls are coming up now a little bit. Maybe that's why they tried to engineer that joke in, just because,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's just like be aware of that. I just want to like, because the privacy walls are coming up. If we backtrack just a little bit before, there was the door,
Hmm.
kind of feeling back into the longing, right? And there was a door. We just kind of let the door be there. Does it feel like the door is open and we're on the other side of the door? What place are we in with this?
Feels like the door has a crack and it's like nudged a little bit open, and there's like light shining through, and I feel maybe a breeze coming in.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you know why it's closed?
No,
Mhm.
on one level,
Mhm.
but I want to say yes on another level.
And I get this sense is if we're like standing at the door, it's kind of keeping with that metaphor. I have this sense of like a warrior at the gate,
Hmm.
right? There's one sense in which I feel like it's like almost like chivalrous, like you're tending to your world, right? Boom, there's a door here and it's closed. There's like a chosenness to it. And I sense also there's another part, right, which is not as chosen or like or or not as conscious or something like that.
There's a judgment to what's on the other side of the door, or a judgment in it being expressed.
A judgment about it.
Maybe not it, but it maybe is an embarrassment of it being expressed.
Got you. Okay, so an awareness of the possibility of embarrassment. Something about that just resonates with the discomfort I feel with you a little bit.
Hmm.
It's almost like I have a sympathetic resonance of just uh, feels like it like a sympathy with the sense of being naked or something like or the possibility of being exposed on some level.
Right.
So let's just let that be there. So an awareness of the possibility of shame. What's it like just to sit with that? Or if I use the word shame. I don't know if that's it.
Yeah, it's like I'm almost it's not shame, right? But it's almost like I'm ashamed of it if it expressed itself.
It's an anticipation.
Right.
If it expresses itself, I'm gonna. I'm gonna blush.
Right.
Right. Totally.
Or it's like I lose control.
Yeah, that part. It's like that part. I think that's the. If we say there's another guard at the gate, I just got this image of like the other guard is more like this one's like this is appropriate, right? Like I have, it's very chosen, right? There's
Right.
and like there's different levels of vulnerability, and it's clear, and you're tending to something. It's like a line. And there's this other part where it feels more like control. Like, in my understanding of controls, like controls, what makes control, it's preventative in nature, right? It's more about making sure something doesn't happen, right?
Right. Right. And it's like, I don't know what the fuck is on the other side of this door. And
Yeah,
if I open it wide open, I lose control.
yeah,
And the unknown there, I don't know if it's just frightening. I don't know what it is, but I'm not ready anymore.
yeah, yeah. Can you say that again? I'm
I'm
not ready.
not, I'm not ready anymore.
Totally.
Because if we like remember that readiness that I usually have with me,
Yeah,
especially in these moments, that won't be here.
yeah, totally. So here we are. It sounds like we're just a little bit out of control right now. We lost the readiness.
I still feel in control though.
Right?
I still feel ready.
Oh, it just came back.
Yeah.
But all the sphincters tightened, like, I'm back.
Right.
Yeah, so just I appreciate that. There's just like it's not even like that there's something back there like that you know about. It's more like it has this element of there's something, there could be something back there that if it goes out, I'll lose control. And I'll be embarrassed, which kind of presupposes a witness again of some kind,
Mm, mm,
right? Of being out of control.
mm, mm,
I would imagine like I could just tend to the part of like, yeah, when I said before in the beginning, like, oh yeah, I can just feel a place where you're just holding a lot.
mm.
Like there's an element of like where it's chosen, and there's also an element where I imagine like there's just some suffering. It's like there's a little bit of suffering there. Like when I think about control, and as we're talking about it, I'm just aware of a sensitivity, I think. There's some fear there.
When you mentioned the word suffering, I was trying to kind of just dive into it, and maybe it's like unseen. The part of me that is unseen and doesn't feel deserving to be seen, and there's a sadness to that.
Yeah. As you say, sadness, is that something you can feel a hint of? I felt a hint of it when you said it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just let that be there too. Sad, like there's some sadness there. There's like, as you articulated, there's an awareness of like, oh, was it a sense of, you said like, is it like an inferiority or a fear of like, it won't be seen as good? Or it's not, it just won't be seen actually.
I'm searching. So
Well, let's just listen to the sadness. The sadness knows to be sad.
it's like love, it's like doesn't deserve to be loved, maybe.
Right, right. Mm, mm. As you say that, I feel myself going, hmm, hmm. Just a compassion. Caring about you. Mm. Mm. What's happening for you just like right now? It's really easy for me just to sink. I just noticed it's like you're talking about like this sadness and it like it won't be loved, or like there's something that's like won't be loved here. And so there's a sadness around it. And it's funny as I sink into it with you, I feel a love for you.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh yeah, I could be friends with you for a long time. It's something like that. It's like that kind of feeling.
Mm.
And I appreciate, I think that there's so much deliberateness to you, right? Like and and really like you're aware of a horizon, and what's on the other horizon is calling to you, and you've construct like the way that you've built your life is in relationship to that, and it's got this like very deliberate quality to it. Um, and in and what I'm feeling is like, oh, there's a place back here that actually seems to be more about like I feel like I'm sinking back. Like it's not so much like the periodic part. It's more of the there's that which gives me, right? I'm resting back into it. As we
Mm.
rest back into it, it sounds like that there's something that um, is concerned about whether or not it's going to be held. Like, will it be loved? Is it lovable? Those concerns start to come up. And there's funny, it's like that's where I'm feeling like, oh yeah, that process of just being a sense of like the quality of holding a being. Like if we relax into that, there's some concerns that come up.
Mm.
And I noticed because there's a holding quality to my presence right now. Like you kind of feel it with my words. It's almost like I have I feel like attending, like this is would be something like the midwife, right? I feel like there's an innocence there
Mm.
and an attunement I'm discovering as it's happening.
Mm. Yeah, it's when I focus on that, the sadness, the idea that it's undeserving of love. It's like almost I lose words or my ability to kind of express myself, and it's just I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but it's just like it just it rushes through,
Yeah,
and it didn't feel bad. It just felt like sweet.
totally. It's sweetness. Totally. There's a sweetness. And it's like there's something about it that where words are different. Like they don't come,
Right.
right?
And I do have like kind of a wave of appreciation for you right now,
Mm.
and this process is sort of like I can sense like you're so into this,
Yeah.
right? And like you're in this with me right now,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow, like people care, like
Oh,
about this, and so
I'm caring about you. Huh.
yeah.
I'm caring about you.
Mm.
Huh. What just happened right there when I said that? Like there's a wave for you.
It's almost like adjusting to that reality.
Yeah. Kind of like not weren't quite expecting that in such a way to be it was.
Yeah, it's sort of like a tension between that warmness, that feels good being cared for, but then that resistance, I want to slap your hand away and say, I don't need your care. I got this.
Yeah.
Like the doorman comes back.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So just something about like, it's like we became aware of like, oh, I'm being met and I'm being cared about and seen. And then we found ourselves in it. We're like, oh, wait a minute. This may presuppose that I need to be cared about. And I'll, it's like, there's like just a little wave of that. Sounds like it came up.
Yeah, and it didn't take over me completely. It's just sort of like they were like kind of juggling with each other, like knocking me around a little bit.
Totally. So it's interesting. I just am really struck by that thing for a period of time wasn't there.
Right.
It just wasn't there. And it was so not there that we weren't even necessarily even thinking about it. Like, and then when I said I cared about you, it's almost like it woke up or something, just a little bit.
Right. Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is like feels like a rare, like it just like I think I feel privileged to be in a very rare space with you. Like
Mm.
feel really personal, and like there's an innocence that I think I see and feel with you. Um,
Wow. It's like this, the title of the story that just rose in my head is that I don't need anybody's love. Right. It's like
yeah.
I can get by fine without it, which is bullshit. But that's the pretense.
Yeah, totally. Now, as if your wife was right here.
I think she would hug me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I just get the sense of like, I think I keep thinking about your wife. It's interesting because, like, as I feel parts of you, she comes forward in my imagination.
Huh. Huh.
Like, and I think what's there for me is I feel so glad that you have her in your life, right? And that, like, that she responds to this, right? She loves this part of you, she sees it. And it does feel to me like there's a quality of like where it makes sense to me. It's worth protecting. Like it's worth being consciously veiled and private. And that, like there is a quality of just like a preciousness.
Mhm.
That's the word, preciousness, that I can feel my nervous system being in response to. And I just feel like when you said you're like a few minutes ago when you said you just felt really appreciative uh, of me and how much I was basically caring about you. Like I just felt like a wave of that. I just felt a wave of that appreciation. Like it was melting. There's a melting
Mhm.
quality I'm feeling with you.
Mhm.
It's almost like I could just kind of sit here. There's a quality of the time right now. I feel like I could just sit here and abide here for like the rest of my life. It's kind of got that eternality to it or something.
Mm. Mm. I just feel like a wave of aliveness,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, ready to march on the battlefield, and like,
Totally. So
yeah,
let's just feel that current. It's like it sounds like another quality of beingness just came up, and it has an aliveness. Just like
right, yeah, it feels awake.
that, like yeah, there's an awakeness. Just let the awakeness be there. Huh. I still feel the innocence, but I do feel this kind of sense of rising, or like I feel like my there was a balloon in my torso. It like filled up such that I don't have to hold myself up anymore. It's just
Right,
fuller,
right.
and there's an innocence there for me.
Hmm. I like that.
Oh, you like that?
Yeah. It's like, that I guess there's a judgmental quality to the word innocence,
Hmm,
but it just kind of evaporated.
hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, I like being innocent.
Yeah, totally. But and there's also it seems like the word a strength, like it's in the word readiness.
Right.
All right, let's go. But there's like an unprotected quality to it, just like a proactive vulnerability that's ready. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So we just kind of we'll start to wind the circle open, right? Is you just is we just start to like allow in this, if we're in a place right now, right? It feels rare, it feels special to me, it feels very real, right? And there was kind of an innocence, there was some pain there was like pause there. And we just kind of kept opening to it. Like at a certain point, it was like went from a sadness to a softness to an innocence. As we rested in the innocence and just stayed there, then all of a sudden the rising started to happen, right?
Right.
Like if we go into just to like the integration part, just like if you just imagine that, and you just unfolded from here, and you just brought this in whatever way that you would into your life and your like your relationship and your projects and your work. Like, what do you see?
Hmm. One thing I don't know if this is respond to that directly, but one thing that feels really kind of alive is just sort of a hyper awareness that I have towards the doorman or the guard, right? And like how much he colors my whole life in
Huh.
a way.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
then we went to the place where we kind of just touched the doorman and kind of peeked at the door and all that, the dynamics there. And just sort of so maybe there's an annoyance about this, right? Like how kind of like
Yeah.
how much I'm kind of structured into this space. Um, but then awareness is it just feels healthy.
Yeah.
So to return back to your question, I just feel like a curiosity of how it's going to manifest
Mm,
and going to be excited to see how it unfolds.
right. Totally. So there's a sense of an it's that's going to unfold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we just kind of like recognize the logos, right? The awareness of a distinction, this quality of an it that has something to do with what I heard you say is has something to do with this awareness of this particular guard that like colors it brings a level of suffering, what I heard to or difficulty that was not that distinguished before. That's now distinguished, you can see it.
Mm.
And now you're having a relationship with it. Like there's like some irritation with it, or but also some possibility of this other thing unfolding, right? So something else is starting to like
Mm.
start to bring the language. If you just imagined, like you just started to walk in the world, right? With and this just kept unfolding. What what do you what do you imagine you'd start to see? What would you hear? What would you taste, touch? How would you do those things? What would you stop seeing? What would you start seeing?
I think I would see the beauty in others. It'd be more salient to me.
Yeah. Oh,
It's sort of like
shine forth.
right. It's like allowing others the chance to love me.
Mm,
It sounds, I don't, that's not the right phrase, but just allowing others an opportunity in a way. And then that will afford me an opportunity to return the favor. So I guess that's where the original line of seeing the beauty in others would be more salient.
Totally. And if we just kind of go and let's just say that like you started seeing the beauty in other people and it started becoming more salient. And then the you started orienting to that salient.
Right.
And you just bring that through time. And you just imagine the face that it articulates and the nervous system that grows in relationship to it, and the self that starts to characterize and make choices and movements and actions based on that. What do you start to see?
Hmm.
The life the world that gets created.
Like laughter. Um,
Yeah.
like the sort of like what's the French word? Jouissance or joy, like it's, yeah.
Totally. And it sounds like you'd be able to you have things where you just say the word laughter and somebody laughs.
It's like, got that magic ability.
And so it's like as we just start to complete here, just in the sense of, I just want to encourage just because usually when we see stuff, right, it's like, there's that experience of like, you don't see with the orientation that you're seeing with, right? You see with it. But then there's these moments where you see it, right? And then that seeing goes to a different level of complexity. And now what you were seeing with becomes seen.
Mm.
And then there's that kind of quality of there's a new place that you're seeing from. And then you can see that and see your life. And that's like the logos, right? Like seeing the frame that you're in, like, and I just want to keep encouraging you just to bring language to this, because the more when you name something, like in the I think is Saint Maximus, the Christian mystic, talked about like, that when you name something, it brings it into being. It gathers
Right.
presence. And
Right.
so you just want to encourage you just to keep articulating it so it can gather more of you. And so you're really beautiful. You're just
Mm.
a beautiful guy. Like you're doing so much good work, right? And you love it, and you're fatherly about it, and you fucking deliberate, and like you're holding two things together, and you're creating a life, and you're married, and like you're probably gonna have a family, and it really does look like you're listening to your daemon.
Mm.
And it takes something to do that, right? And you do it well, and you're fucking doing it, man. And it seems to well forth. There's also a quality of innocence about you. Like it's like I would almost like I would imagine that there's like um, that which has like the world light up, and then you want to ask questions about it or articulate it. It's like
Mm.
I would imagine that has something to do with that innocence that we touch, like that kind of sense of wonder, right? It's also what St. Maximus would say is like the ground of our consciousness. He distinguishes the ground of our consciousness is a existential astonishment at the givenness of being. Like the ontological ground, as he would distinguish it, is a existential astonishment at the givenness of being,
Mm.
including itself, and that like feel that really alive in you.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, when your first impression of me, right? Like maybe the first, I don't know, half hour of when we spoke the first time, and then now after going through the circling session, is something fundamentally changed, or what was added to that?
Oh yeah, like let's see. Well, it's interesting actually. What's changed is, I think, more distinction or understanding of what I was drawn to in the first place. Like it's
Mm.
almost like I feel like I've been getting to know like why I feel so in flow with you.
Like that makes sense. Like, yeah.
And so
Hmm.
on some level, I've been feeling like, oh, it's been becoming articulated. But the thing that's articulated is actually present. There's present, it's just present. There's a presence, the way that you world, right? And me being in your world, kind of work
Like,
like that. And it's interesting. It's like there's a knowingness. So on some level, we've just been kind of like, I've been like, what is that?
right.
Like, oh, it's like this, and like, oh, wait a minute, what about that part? You're like, ah, fuck you, I don't want to do that. like,
Yeah.
like, and we just kind of kept getting. It feels like unveiling.
Mm. And like, I want to call it that I have a desire now to, to circle you, or to like you just, or see you be circled.
Right.
And I'm curious, like, do you get circled often? Like, and then the other question I had is do you have the same similar tension? Because it seems like you do, between this kind of this daemon and then the structure.
Yeah. 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 For me, actually, it's like, um, for me in this part of my life, here's just the truth about me. Like, I actually have, like, I think one little, like, thread that like connects me to the ground. There's something in me that just wants to go dissolve into the everything. Like, there's just something about me that just will, and it's gotten me in trouble before, right? And uh, and I've learned from that trouble it's made, right? And that's had me really get a lot more here. So for me, it's interesting. Like, a lot of what has been transforming me is a lot of being a lot more deliberate in what I'm doing with my life. Like, marriage has had a huge impact on me. Like,
Mm,
like in ways that are just humbling to me. Like, and I think it has something to do with this background sense of that there's something unambiguous in my world. It's almost like if there's a center of the mandala, it's like the right thing got into the center, and there's like this ontological chiropractic adjustment.
mm-hmm,
I'm a lot more relaxed with my life and a lot more free to be disciplined, because there's something like the right things are in order. And it
mm,
has a lot to do with just being, uh, letting the woman I'm with, Brienne, really see she's given all of herself to me. And then when I really see that, I recognize a, like, an anything, like whatever it takes, like right there it is. There was something in the way of that for me that has a lot to do with my history. So it was like, when we got back together, we'd broken up for about a year. When we got back together, I started to recognize this bond that we had, because I couldn't see it, right? For a lot of different reasons. I couldn't relate to it. But when I came back in, I saw it. And I'm like, oh my God, like, this is like the most important thing in the world. Like,
mm-hmm,
and I didn't grow up in a place that, like, my parents weren't like securely attached. They were fucking crazy, they're awesome people. They're like amazing people, and they had addiction, and all the craziness goes with that. So like, it's not like I had any reference point, but there was a place in me that was really frozen in relationship to Brienne's pain. And because I was frozen, I couldn't, like, I would always have to be guarding myself or pretending like I was there and just enduring it. But because I couldn't actually touch her care, her heart.
mm,
And when I did, when it unfroze, it was so obvious. And I'm just like, that has just kind of blossomed in my life. And like, I'm a lot more organized, I'm a lot more, successful and effective, and
right.
all that kind of stuff. And it's a lot more effortless. Um, that's the thing right now in my life that I'm looking at, and it's yielding so much light. Like, so
Mm,
I notice I talk about it a lot, as you hear me kind of talk about it, because what I'm doing is, it's just this thing that's like glowing. And I'm like, how the fuck did that happen?
mm. How
Yeah.
did I stumble on this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is there really is a quality of like, what's fascinating to me. There's like a quality of, yeah, I'm wedded fully, really wedded fully. And I'm wedded to the right thing, right? To the
Hmm.
right person. And that when I'm walking around in the world looks different to me. Like that's what's really interesting to me is like even when I'm not thinking about my relationship, like when I talk to the guy at the grocery store, right, when the thing that used to really stress me out looked like the end of the world, I'm just kind of like I just made it differently. And
Yeah.
so it's so interesting, like where I feel like I've gotten such a deeper respect for um one is that there's this tradition called marriage that
Right.
I just looked at it as like some formality you have to do, but I'm really feeling the effects of the wisdom of that that institution and the evolution. The truth of it feels like there's an evolutionary truth in its being been there for thousands of years that I feel like I'm experiencing.
Right.
It's just
Right.
I feel humbled by that. I mean, being the child of secular humanism, having this
It's
kind of almost religious experience with something traditional is really, really having me feel different.
it's like I want to comment on that, but I'm glad that that ding brought us because I have another podcast in like 10 minutes that I got to jump on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's this term I like called intellectual dark matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all the dark matter that kind of makes up, like, you know, the iceberg that you can't see, that gives justification for a practice or an idea or whatever. And then we got kind of like separated from that when it comes to marriage, or a lot of people did. But it seems like to me, it's like you're understanding or grokking that intellectual dark matter when it comes to marriage. Like, I get it.
Totally. Yes. It's changing me.
That's awesome, man.
Finding out about it as it happens. It's just really cool. It's like
Right.
it's very rich. Yeah. So I'm
S-
like so when I see, for example, when I just see that you're the person that can see you,
mm,
bond to you at a deep level, it's so meaningful for me
right.
in a way that I don't think I've ever been able to appreciate that before.
Mm. So, um, what should we do with this? Is that-
Oh, I think we should
yeah,
let's look at it and make sure it's all good. Let's spread it out in the world.
yeah. I think I probably post it on YouTube, and you can feel free to do whatever you want with it. But yeah, I think YouTube's a better format than the podcast.
Right.
Uh,
I would imagine you can just kind of like in the intro, right? If people are used to doing that, you can just say like if you like I recommend just put the link there and then just go like you may want to watch this. It's probably going to be better to
yeah, and I may kind of like, you know, your first kind of intro before, like maybe I'll just slice that in and say if you want to watch the full thing, then, you know, go on YouTube and check it out. That
yeah.
might be a bet. That maybe because you had a lot of kind of good intellectual content that kind of rounded circling just for me, and I'm sure a lot of people who haven't heard about it.
Yeah, totally. Can you get that sense of like circumambulating?
Oh, totally. That was beautiful. Yeah, no, I feel like I left this. So I first, I just want to thank you deeply, my friend, for, you know, like agreeing to do this again. And I got a lot from it. It's one of those things that, you know, a lot of seeds got planted that I need to like, just let's sit and see what comes forth from it. So I just have a tremendous amount of like appreciation and gratitude
Mm,
for you right now. And then us doing this.
gratitude received, my friend.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that. And, yeah, let's just release and see what happens.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Cool.
All right. Like, I'm glad we were able to warm you up for the next podcast.
Yeah, I'm talking to a Marxist now. So it's like I'd like a whole different mindset.
Make him cry.
Yeah, yeah. Or it might make me cry. So
Mwah.
all right, man.
Thank you, my friend. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.